Hi, Emily.
Hi, Samantha. I had to interrupt you like midstream of like thought and conversation because I was like, we have to hit record. This is, I want to talk about this. Don't say anything more until we're recording.
Okay, now we're
So,
recording. My lips are unsealed.
yes. All right. So let me intro what we were talking about. So you have been part of an amazing group of people that have developed like this new open source, amazing resource for it. We've been talking about it for Salesforce, but it really could be used for any database that creates fake data, right? Fake
Mhm.
data within your data model makes it real easy to press a button and just have lots of new fake records created.
Possibly easy, possibly hard.
More, it's different.
The
It's about
aspiration is that it'll be easy for everyone.
yeah. So it's a little different. Like even if you had someone helping you with the kind of the technical part, it's choosing some decisions that would then be able to in mass create a lot of records, right? Saying I want everyone to have a first name that starts between A and F. And
Yeah.
then a bunch of fake names could be created. And so you have to put time into making those decisions. And the technical part is writing those decisions in the right way. But otherwise you're what, like typing into your database to make new fake data and making your own decisions about what it is. Or sometimes what I've done is googled 500 fake names in
Yeah.
a spreadsheet and then
Yeah.
data loaded it into or
For
loaded it in.
anybody who wants an easy way to do that, there's a cool website called Mockaroo, and you can create like a CSV file of fake data that's pretty easy, point and click. Like I want names, I want phone numbers or whatever. So that might be faster. You still have to upload it and tell it what you want, but it's a very nice interface for that.
Okay, good resource. Thank you. So I had been questioning, why is my good friend and business partner so into this and putting so much time and effort and seeing all these great benefits? And I just am not. I am not as much interested. And I think it's great. And I really applaud all the work done and I can see your benefits. I just can't get myself into it. And I think the reason is because, as I've seen in my work recently, I am willing, maybe foolishly, but I like it, to release a process and automation, put something into real live production before it's kind of all the way finished and all the way tested. That as
Mhm.
things happen in the real world, we hit the errors, we hit these like weird cases, or not even weird cases sometimes the main cases, and adjust in real life, in real time. What many people would probably say is like maybe finishing the airplane while you're flying
Mhm.
it. A big bulk of it is done and flying, but finishing touches happening while it's in the air. And I know that that's really can be, arresting for people. For me, it feels comfortable. And can you talk about what
Yeah.
uses you have for this fake data generation?
So I can say one, I have a story that about why I like want to work on this so much. And the reason for that is because many years ago, I was fixing some code in a sandbox for an org. And you have to change code in the sandbox in Salesforce and then you have to move it into your regular Salesforce version. And I was getting all of these errors and I didn't know what was wrong because I just changed like this one little thing in the code. And like it was like changing the text from like fall 2020 to like spring 2020. And that needed to show up on the page. And that was in the code. Um, and it was just agonizing. And I couldn't submit a support case because it was custom code and I hadn't written the code. So I think this was a place where I was like, probably actually didn't really know what I was doing and shouldn't have been responsible for this, but that's also how you learn. And that was how I learned this tool called the Debug Log, which is part of Salesforce, where you can see what happens when you run your own code. And here's what happened. The code was looking for a record that didn't exist in the sandbox, but it existed in production. And so the sandbox had taken a random sampling of some data and put it in there. And our code broke, but the code wasn't actually broken. It was just looking for something that wasn't there. And it wasn't obvious to me that it wasn't there because it wasn't something like a contact. It was like this way down record called a term that was like when different programs were happening, and the code was looking for those terms to display them and just didn't find any. And it was one of those really agonizing problems where it didn't look wrong to me. And I think lots of us have had that experience of like, I did data entry and it didn't look wrong, it looked right. And so that got me on this path of realizing that partial sandboxes just don't sample data where you have both halves of a lookup that you would have in production, and that we need a way to have appropriate data so that we can actually see if something is working. And that's even like just falling short of like actually doing like super rigorous testing, which we've talked about in another video that I don't feel like I'm very good at it. But I found that situation so frustrating. Like I felt really insecure and frustrated. I spent so much time on it, and it was a totally preventable technical problem that had to do with data sampling, and we just have no real control over what data ends up in our sandboxes unless you do a data migration every time, or you type everything in. And to me, it seems like those are two bad options. Now we have three bad options, which is that we have this tool that's really hard to learn how to use for me, but also like so powerful, and I'm learning it in a really supportive community. And so because I had that experience of like staring at the void, I'm like, oh, this really motivates me to want to have a real solution for this.
I see. Yeah. And okay, so we taught you touched on in that story sort of one reason why you might want to have some fake data, right? To test if your processes are going to work before you start them working in your real live system.
Or this was also a case where the process wasn't working in our real system.
Right.
In order to change it, I had to change it in the sandbox. But then it also wasn't working in the sandbox for a different reason. And I was like, literally, what am I supposed to do about this situation?
Yeah. And then we had talked about also before we started recording some other reasons. Like I know, actually, I feel like the genesis of this that I heard from you was for training, getting people into a sandbox to train them on using the data system before they're in the real system. Which is
I totally love that version of it.
I love that. I love that version.
The same contacts every time. So there's always a Samantha and there's always an Emily, and you update a bunch of stuff, and then I can see that you learned it, and then I can just create new data for the next person.
I love that version too. Maybe because in some orgs I've taken the delete button away from people, but I also, my inclination is just you can't really break that much.
Yeah.
And anything that like goes wrong is going to go wrong, when you're not here with me in this training. So like, let's just do this in the real world, in real production. That's like my orientation towards the training.
Yeah.
So another reason, what is another reason that we talked about? There's checking processes, there's training,
there's demos. So there's a big reason, and this actually hasn't been something that has come up for me that much in real life, but if you have data that with very sensitive information about students, for example, or like citizenship and things like that, you want to show how Salesforce works, then you can use your same Salesforce, but you can just put in totally anonymous random data. And that's also useful. Some consultants, this isn't the kind of work that I typically do, but are showing people Salesforce for the first time, and they don't even have any data yet in Salesforce. And so you might want to just load up Salesforce with some data so that you can show them how it works.
That really makes sense, especially when I think about showing reports where you aggregate data. I think in demos, unless I have a need for a report, I have found that I am mostly looking at single records. So I usually create a Mickey Mouse record and a bunch of things, and going through the manual creation of it just the one time can be enough. It's so, but that's a really good point.
Oh, and there's another case that people use, which is like for universities, which again, I've never done anything like this, but if you're building Salesforce for admissions, which is kind of a big thing nowadays, then you need to like see what happens when you get like 10,000 applications a minute or something like that. And so you can use these data generator tools like Snowfakery to create an unlimitedly large file, which would be kind of impossible to like copy and paste in Excel or make a ton of records in Salesforce.
That's so interesting. You know, what I would say to that, if I was like, I'm not going to learn how to do your third option of how to do this, I'd be like, I'm just going to create pretty much the same record at the same time. Yeah. I would make 1 or 2 or 3 rows of data and in Excel, copy and paste them into a 10,000 rows. Be like, I don't care if they're making the same information. Mm-hmm. I want to see how it works when 10,000 things hit at the same time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. So let's bring this out. There's clearly 2 possible orientations towards this. And I don't know that we are even trying to say what's right, wrong, or in between for any situation, but what do you think people should do when they're thinking about, you know, getting into potentially they have the opportunity, they want to make fake data? Like, what's the first step towards, say, your Cumulus CI / Snowfakery option?
Yeah, so there's a couple of online resources that people can read or practice on. But I think that the first thing that you should do is like be able to answer the clear why question. Why do you need data? Is it for testing? Is it for demos? Do you want to do export import? That's totally fine. I actually just did that yesterday. Like, I don't think that everyone has to be automating this all the time. And also, like, the orgs that I'm working in, the data model is so complicated that I actually haven't even been figured out how to do it in Snowfakery. So I'm often doing like accounts, contacts, opportunities, or something that's like a little bit more bounded. So I think, yeah, the place to start is to have a clear reason why. Start small. It can be 1 import file, or it can be 1 Macaru run that you import. And then you can build on that. And I really think, for me at least, like, reaching the limit of what I could do in a partial sandbox, like, was my motivator. So I don't think people need to go to the like 5 fire flame emoji version of this. I think it's, and like, one of the things that I think is so fulfilling about doing this is like reaching your edge of what you know, and then like learning a little bit more and a little bit more. And so I think what I'm hearing,
ooh, I love that space.
What I'm hearing, Emily, is like, you don't like totally have this problem in your work, and that's okay. And when you have to generate data, you have ways of doing it that work for you. So in a certain way, we're speaking the same language.
Well, I want to change it though. Not the data generation like topic, I think, is good as an example, but the wider sort of discussion is also around how much do you do in like testing, sandbox versus production? How much like comfort do you have there? And I would like to get your reaction to this. So in real life, I released created an automated process. It was like, okay, tested, not thoroughly tested the way many tech professionals would. And it hit production, things are going pretty well. And then I noticed like, oh, first names and last names in some people are looking a little switched. What's going on? And I had accidentally in my process put first name in the last name file column and vice versa. And I had to go in and find them and correct them. And it was all live production. And it took maybe like a day or 2 to recognize it and change it. Yeah. One of my users even like noticed it and said something. And I stepped back and like thought about that. And my comfort level is like, I'm okay seeing things go wrong and having other people see it go wrong and be part of the changing of it. And I actually really thought about your concept of I was wrong, right? Yeah. And being open, that it really exposes a vulnerability to show, you know, my processes and where they go right and wrong. So I'm interested in your reaction that if I had tested better with a lot of fake data, I probably would have caught that before it was live. I didn't, and I had to go and correct my mistakes. What's your like reactions?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of service is a Yiddish word for like agony about testing, because I still think that even if we had like the perfect model data set, that doesn't mean that we're going to exhaustively test everything and come up with everything that could possibly go wrong. And so like And if you're using sandboxes with a platform like Salesforce, we already know that they don't give you an adequate data set. So even if you tested everything in the sandbox based on like the best practices and what we all should be doing and stuff, you might not have a lookup field that you would have in production. So there's just certain things that you can't test for. And so I really appreciate your attitude and your mindset of just being like, cool, now we know this, let's fix it. Like,
and I thought you were going to have hand wringing and put the other side out there.
No, I think that the way you're talking about it is really, really cool. And also just because I feel so discouraged that, like, I don't know, I'm thinking about this time when I did 55 tests. I tested 55 features according to like a really rigorous process. And then like something that wasn't in that list of 55 like went horribly wrong in production. And I was like, well, I caught like the 3 things out of the 55 that didn't work. But if there's just something that feels like you're never really done testing, you have to eventually decide to take the risk, which is a good thing, move the work into production, and then live with it and change it and iterate and all of those things. So I think that's what you do. You're doing that really well. Like, it's great. And I don't think, I guess I don't think that the purpose of generating data is only for testing. So I think that is like, and I don't think I really knew that until we had this conversation. So that's why I love having these chats, where some things about it are like this like challenge of like, can we do this really hard thing? Which is really motivating for me. And some of it is also for being more able to share our work with the community. So like being able to show our work with 1,000 records instead of 1 Mickey Mouse, or being able to export a data set and share it with someone else who has the same data model, or being able to lead demos where we don't have to like gray out, private information. And also like the process, like the building skills and like the process of like learning how to make fake data sets using this platform called GitHub that I'm a beginner in, like that really appeals to me, even potentially as much or even more than like generating fake data for the sake of fake data.
That appeals to me as well. But again, like just having fake data be one example of what you're saying about like pushing yourself and learning. I feel so comfortable doing it in production, in real live data. And even if that means making mistakes. And I think some of it stems from trying to also give the message to people that it's rare that you break everything. It's really rare. You might break some things, but it's pretty rare to break everything.
Yeah, and also what I meant to say before is that I recently did a data upload, download VLOOKUP upload, and I mismapped fields and I switched first name and last name, or like state and zip code or something. It was like very obvious later when I was looking at it live in production with, someone from the org, and I was like, oh, I can fix that. But it's like, it's not just that mistakes happen when we like automate things. It's like, that's like part of it's just like part of everything. And luckily they hadn't done a mail merge. They hadn't done a dashboard. Like they hadn't like made decisions based on that information.
Yeah. I think that's a message. If there's a message in this that I would want people to take away, it would be that mistakes happen, if you're trying stuff out, and they happen in real live data, and we survive. We can get over that, whether you're the person building whatever to help or the person using it, and to both be forgiving of ourselves and our colleagues when we see this happen, and I guess learn from it.
Yeah. So takeaway 1 is mistakes happen in all environments, in production, in sandboxes, in dev orgs. Like we catch as many mistakes as we can, but like that's part of the work, and they happen in production. And then I think another like takeaway is like, to the extent that it's possible, like find a group of people who challenge you so that you can build your technical skills in a supportive environment, And it can be about data generation, or it can be about testing, or it can be about like building flows or any kind of automation or anything, really anything. I've been really interested in scripting Google Sheets lately. But I just think like there's so much stuff that is possible that seems impossible at first. And data generation is one of those things for me. And so it's like really inspiring to be like, oh, it's not impossible. It's just really challenging.
And
that's
point two, right?
So that's point two.
I have a third message. Okay. I'm thinking more messages as we go. So this kind of concept around like the MVP, or just getting out your airplane maybe before it's finished. I think that, as I said to you before we started recording, to admit that here, that's my orientation and I'm okay with it. And I clean up the mess when it happens. And I have reasons why I think it's good to show other people that pathway. I thought I would be totally cut out of the tech world just for admitting it, that like, oh my God, you've admitted that you're not doing like 100%, 1000% thorough testing of every scenario before like things start going in your real environment, that it feels like a very taboo thing to say, but also at the same time feels like exactly what mission-driven orgs can and should be oriented to. Like, we have to solve problems right now. We can't wait till we've tested every scenario, and things change every 6 months. So we need to be getting out our ideas, like design thinking kind of thing, like going forward, and not the tech side, the whole other side, everything involved in mission-driven work. So I think our tech side can reflect that, even though I feel a little nervous.
Yeah, a culture of experimentation and creativity. Like that means that like, you know, you might have some errors to clean up. You just run a report and fix it, or you make another version of the automation. So I think, yeah, like sensitizing ourselves to that is really important. And it's sort of like, I feel like for me, it's sort of like allergy shots, where like I need to like inoculate myself against like this like fear that I have when something doesn't work at first. But I also know that like nothing always works all the time, and like these things are fixable, and like relationships are at the center of it, not the like technology working 150% of the time.
Yeah, that's so true. Our relationships with our fellow humans, and our relationships with our technology, that we can continue to adopt and engage it even when we see it go wrong, and then be corrected. Yeah. Totally. Thank you, Samantha. I always feel pushed in these conversations, and I have more to think about on these topics. Thank you.
Thank you.